When you talk about tax bracket and how much tax you actually pay, these are two different concepts and two different numbers, two different things that we are talking about. Today, we'll dig into what we call marginal tax rate and effective tax rate and determine what exactly these two terms mean and how you calculate each of them and why each of them is important to you. So let's start with your marginal tax rate. When you hear the terms tax bracket, what tax bracket do you fall into? I don't want to be in a higher tax bracket. When you hear things like that being thrown around, what we're talking about is your marginal tax rate. And so you think of marginal tax rate equals tax bracket. What's super important to remember, you guys, when we're talking about tax bracket and marginal tax rate is the tax bracket or marginal tax rate that you fall into does not mean that that is the percentage of tax you're paying on your income, okay? Telling someone what tax bracket you're in really only tells them how much income you make or roughly how much taxable income you make. It really doesn't tell them anything about the actual taxes you pay. So let's break this down and talk numbers, okay? So if we look at this chart, you guys, this is a marginal tax rate chart. And let's look at the first column for single individuals, okay? You'll see there's three columns. There's single individuals, there's married individuals filing joint, and there's head of household. But for the sake of what we're talking about right this second, let's use the first one. Let's talk about single individuals. So this tells you what percentage you're paying on the income you're making, all right? And so what this means, you guys, I want you to think of this as a ladder or stepping stone. Okay, so the first stepping stone is that 10% tax bracket. And what that means is that everybody has to step here. So whether they stop here because they only make up to this $9,950 as a single individual, or they keep going because they make more than that, they're gonna pay 10% on every dollar they earned up to this threshold. And again, this threshold at 10% for single individuals is $9,950. So what that means is that if someone has taxable income of $10,000, okay, and we have another person who has taxable income of $10 billion, they're paying 10% tax on their first $9,950 if they're single, regardless of what their ending earned income is. Okay, guys? So if you're single with taxable income of $100,000, using this chart, that means you stepped on the 10% for the first $9,950 of income if you're single. Then you stepped on the 12% for the next chunk of taxable income, and then 22% for the next chunk, and then you stopped on the 24%. This means that you pay 24% only on your income that's above that threshold you see of $86,376. All right, so each chunk of money is taxed at these percentages. So what this means, you guys, even if you fall into the highest tax bracket, you're only paying 37% on the income over these threshold amounts. So I've heard people say that they've turned down a raise or they've considered not taking a promotion because they don't want the increased income to kick them up to the next tax bracket. But what we've seen looking at this chart and getting an illustration of what the marginal tax rate actually is and how it works, we now realize that getting kicked up to another tax bracket doesn't mean you're paying more tax on all of the money you've earned. You're just paying more tax on that new chunk of money above that new tax threshold. This brings us to our effective tax rate. So your effective tax rate is how much tax did you pay in comparison to your total taxable income. So this is super easy to calculate, you guys. You just take the total tax you paid on your 1040 and you divide it by your total taxable income. And that is your effective tax rate. So if your taxable income was $100,000 and your tax paid for the year was $25,000, then your effective tax rate is 25%. Because of the marginal tax rates and how it works like a stepping stone, you guys, your effective tax rate is typically going to be less than whatever marginal tax bracket you fall into. And that's because you're paying less tax on those lower dollars. So using the marginal tax rate chart that we showed earlier, if you're a single taxpayer who makes $523,601 in a tax year, then only that $1 that's above the threshold we saw is taxed at 37%. Everything else is taxed at those lower tax brackets. And that individual will actually only pay 30% in taxes. So that 30% is their effective tax rate for the year. In the end, if you want to know what your tax bracket is, what your marginal tax rate is, you're going to look at line 15 of your 2020 tax return. This is going to change every year. If we're talking 2020 taxes, you'll look at your line 15 of that tax return, and then you'll use it to compare to that chart we showed earlier in the video to see what your marginal tax rate is. If you're wanting to determine your effective tax rate, aka the actual percentage of tax you paid, you're going to take the total tax from line 16 of your 1040 and you're going to divide it by line 15 of your tax return, which is your total income. And that percentage will be your effective tax rate. In the end, your effective tax rate is really the number you care about. And you get to the effective tax rate by using the marginal tax rate. This is all a lot and it goes back and forth, but the great thing is if you use a tax software or an accountant, they do all of this for you guys. And you can just simply ask them, what's my marginal tax rate? What's my effective tax rate? And you can get all that information from your tax preparer or your tax software. If you guys have any questions about what we talked about today, go ahead and leave a comment below. And then I highly, highly suggest you head on over to our Facebook community, Money, Taxes, and Finance for Small Business, because these topics are what we talk about on a regular basis and have live trainings on every week. You can access that group by clicking the link in the description box. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and while you're loving on me hard, go ahead and hit the notification bell so you never miss a future video.